But I guess, from an innovation perspective, and maybe I would lean to Redoy and then we can, pass it on to the next to kind of share a little bit. But from an innovation perspective.
Sure. I mean, I would actually split innovation maybe into two buckets, really. There's like optimization and innovation. So the reason I say that is because based on what Deepan said, I think with COVID and sort of the acceleration of digital adoption, you have banks and fintechs who are kind of ahead of the game that perhaps have the footprint, have the licenses, the presence, but it's about optimization. And I don't know if that's innovation really, because there it's really about, like I said, removing friction from the journey, connecting to an RTP, adding data validation services, et cetera. And then you have those who are kind of playing catch up. I think there it's about, there it's about like how quickly can I catch up to the next bank or fintech, and that's working with like a network of networks, et cetera. On the innovation front, I think you want to consider things like what DBS is participating in with, or has participated in with Prompt Pay Now, soon to have Pay Now UPI, Pay Now Do It Now. We have Partior, which is the blockchain-based wholesale settlement company that was set up by DBS, Temasek, and JP Morgan. I'll put that in the innovation bucket. I think it's two separate camps.
So that's from an innovation perspective. And then you kind of mentioned a little bit in terms of optimization. So it's sort of the both wheels that need to kind of, work together.
Yeah, I think interestingly, we for us, so DBS Remit, we have Remit, the direct-to-consumer platform, and then we have our kind of institutional version of it, where we offer it to other institutions. So two different kind of use cases. For the former, it's really about what the customers are demanding and where they're sending money to. Like I said earlier, without fail, month on month, you have your traditional destinations where we need to make sure that it's best in class. How close can we get to 24/7? Can we change something to an alias or proxy-based kind of service instead of adding all the traditional pay details, et cetera? Abstracting away the details of adding an IFSC code or a BSB code, just make it very simple. So that's that piece. But when it comes to the institutional piece, it's really about what Deepan mentioned, which is potentially working with partners to expand your footprint and network and kind of new endpoints, et cetera. And that's very much about choosing the right partner.
And I think, then I'd love to hear from Zenon and Deepan a little bit more, but, it's forums like this that helps us to kind of think a little bit more in terms of what are those major shifts and how do we, like Ram mentioned, the nodes of enabling all these scenarios to take place. But Zenon, is there any perspective from your side?
Yeah, I think one of the things, it's good to separate like optimization and innovation. I think, when you look at some of the most successful payment products in Asia right now, I'd say, DBS Remit, Alipay, TransferWise, the things that Currency Cloud is doing. There's no blockchain, there's no significant AI. Too often we get blinded by the technology and we lose sight of what the points of friction that we are looking at. But I think two things kind of come to mind around how the industry is relooking at payments. One is an incredible focus on use cases. This is always a challenge for a bank, and I've experienced this with our local bank here in Singapore, which is not DBS, but is one of the other ones. And we were having some problems, and I wanted to kind of renegotiate our FX rate. And so I gave them a call, and I said, look, what do I do to do this? And they said, well, you have to talk to your relationship manager. And I said, okay, well, who is my relationship manager? And tick, 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 you don't have one. And that kind of like, it becomes very challenging for a bank to service. We're effectively an SME compared to a larger organizations. It's like, how do you effectively service these segments leveraging technology? Because it's impossible for you to have if this bank, which will remain unnamed, if OCBC had a relationship manager for every small business, then they'd go out of business because it's unprofitable, right? So I understand that, but increasingly we're seeing banks look at very specialized use cases, like what can I provide to an SME? What can I provide in B2B payments, and leverage technology to be able to do that? And those, I think that is really compelling. And a lot of the work that we've been doing is working with companies around kind of understanding what those opportunities are around that. And then the second point, which you told me I'd forget, and I totally did, is how banking as a service and platform banking is starting to play a role as well. Banks becoming an extension of some of these other platforms. And we were talking about TransferWise as an example, and it always amazes me when I give TransferWise details for my US dollar account that it's some, I forget the name of the bank in the US. It's a very small bank in the US, but because of de-risking from all of the other big banks, there's a smaller bank that says, look, I'll work with you on this and I'll do this. And they're essentially providing banking as a service, lending out the license so that Wise doesn't have to worry about dealing with all the regulatory oversight on that. And there are really compelling examples of how this kind of platform banking is really getting into all of these other use cases. And I think that idea of embedded finance, I mean, it sounds like another word. Just to give you an example, I mean, we're doing a study for an e-commerce client looking at payments, e-commerce payments in Indonesia. And they gave the example of a SaaS platform for fitness centers, right? So you figure you have a fitness center, there's a lot of admin that goes on the back end, right? You need to book classes, time schedules, memberships, and all of this. So the provider was providing this software as a service for the gyms to use. And then they started providing payments, right? So we accept card payments, we'll accept local payment methods, right? So they've inserted themselves into the payment flow. And I said, well, what else can we do on this? Well, we can finance, right? We can finance the gym on one side of things. So, all of the equipment that they need to buy, the capital expenditure, and then we can finance the consumers on the other side. And so increasingly, the relationship is shifting away from traditional banks to whatever the embedded service provider is, whether that's a C group or if that's this gym membership platform, that idea of kind of making the payment invisible is something else that I think, around innovation is something that we're really seeing around that.
And maybe for Deepan, if you'd like to add on there.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, at Visa, we don't own the sending customer, right? They're not our customer, whether it's the person for P2P or the business for B2B, et cetera, right? We're a network, right? So our role is to work with banks and fintechs to serve their customers. And when we speak to banks or fintechs and we talk about corridors, endpoints, cost, reach, speed, the customer journey, how many buttons does the customer have to send, how much information does the customer have to input to effect that payment? I mean, the analogy really is, for me at the end of the day, is making a cross-border payment as easy, as quick, as cost-effective, as ubiquitous as a domestic RTP payment, right? And that's kind of like the benchmark. That's all about the customer journey and that experience, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it's quite consistent across the board here. At the end of the day, it's, what do we need to do to meet that customer journey and deliver that speed or that need that we're seeing across Asia Pacific. And I think you mentioned a little bit, Deepan, that in Asia specifically, this is, we have migration that goes overseas, that study overseas. We've got individuals that also buy property overseas, right? So it's about how do we meet that expectation to make it, possible for these kind of scenarios to happen.